We are live in Fort Collins, and it is the first full week of school for the kiddos at the Poudre School District, and CSU starts this week. So all kids back in school, Fort Collins running at full capacity. That being said, we do have early release because of heat advisories. And, last week, my wife and I, we kind of looked at each other like, all right, we're in the mid upper 90s. Makes sense. And this week we looked at it, we're like, upper 80s, lower 90s. I don't know how much I'm on that bandwagon for releasing kiddos early. But regardless, let's keep them safe-ish. And fortunately, but we did talk, fortunately, like my, wife stays at home and we have the flexibility to take on that time requirement of picking up the kids early and being at the house for an entire week, where there's a lot of people who have to find childcare really quickly. We fortunately, I will say the Poudre School District did a good job of sending out the information late last week. I think even maybe it was either Friday or Saturday. So you do have some time to schedule, but at the same time, that's just a little bit tough. And for high 80s, low 90s, I'm just not necessarily fully on board. So let me know, am I just kind of this old curmudgeon that feels like, kids will be just fine, and the kids are not just fine in 88-degree school systems? I don't know. Just me. Now, this is Live in Fort Collins. We talked to you guys about things that have happened over the last week, things that are going on. City Council, for the first time in 3 weeks, we've had a city council work session that talked about parking in downtown Fort Collins, which is a really big deal. I worked in downtown Fort Collins. Golly, now I'm, for a long time, I worked downtown Fort Collins. I was a leasing agent in 2010. So 15 years I've worked in downtown Fort Collins in some form or fashion. And I've seen a lot of changes. And downtown parking is definitely will be, I see. Kids will be fine, better off than adults. I agree with that. I don't know, just me. I feel like they'll be just fine. But I've seen a lot of changes downtown Fort Collins, and this would be a big one. We've not had paid parking in downtown Fort Collins, which is what they're proposing. But we'll jump into some of the stats and data here shortly. That being said, I'll share my screen real quick. This is just huge. So we've got some major amenities in Fort Collins: Epic, Adora Pool and Ice Center, Northside Odslon Center, Mulberry. We've got Mulberry Pool, Lincoln Center, Senior Center. We've got some great amenities in Fort Collins that have been built over the last many years. And this one was voted on in 2015 by the residents in Fort Collins. A lot of them were saying, hey, we don't have lap lanes in Southeast Fort Collins. Didn't know it was that big of a deal per se, but hey, we have jumped forward to today, and we are going to see a world-class, state-of-the-art Southeast Community Center begin construction probably next year, with opening in 2028. Now, this is going to be a $91 to $103 million facility, and that means City of Fort Collins is going to be kicking in $68 to $80 million, and then a fully operational, extensive library in Poudre School District is kicking in $23 million. They're on top of that, they're going to have community rooms, licensed childcare, rec spaces such as gyms and fitness areas, indoor and outdoor aquatics facilities with lap lanes, supported by the Poudre School District. So this is really kind of a combination, a marriage of three different areas in Fort Collins: Poudre School District, City of Fort Collins, and Public Library, Poudre Public Library. Those three institutions have kind of joined forces to build on this 10-acre site right by Fossil Ridge High School. Super exciting. 2028 will get here before we know it. Here, a couple comments real quick I want to read into it. Temperature schools are difficult to adjust. There's a lot of information regarding ventilation, improving learning environments. If ventilation is not provided, as I understand to be the case in non-air conditioned schools, the air quality can deteriorate and make learning difficult. Totally understand that. Fortunately, there's a lot of schools that have been built recently that do have air conditioning, and those are going to stay in operation. But those that don't will be shutting down early for the week. And I don't have any knowledge or background or expertise to be able to discuss learning environments and ability to learn. It's definitely just, I would say, it's not frustrating because, like, again, fortunately we have the flexibility, but I would have to imagine parents that don't have the flexibility would be quite upset or frustrated at the minimum, that says, gosh dang, like I have to take off more PTO or find childcare and add an expense. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I know that there's lots of different mentalities and theories out there about the current school system and how it is just kind of a formalized daycare possibly. But right, wrong, or indifferent, it is hard. Any change is hard, especially when it happens so fast. So definitely will be a challenge for parents this week. Okay, here's something I would love also for you guys is to weigh in on. City of Fort Collins sales tax, is it 8? I think it's total 8.05 or 8.15. I can't remember, but it's gone up, a half cent in the last since 2024, because we passed the half-cent sales tax for parks and recreation, public transportation, and environmental. Now, Larimer County is proposing a 0.15% sales tax. So essentially 15 cents on every $100 spent, 15 cents for every $100 spent, but it would raise it, the City of Fort Collins sales tax at that point to either, what would that be, 8.2% or 8.3%. I can't remember if it's at 8.05 or 8.15, so sorry about that. But it's for our streets. And this is where, golly, I think Fort Collins operates absolutely fantastic. 24/7, 365 services, right up there. Our parks and infrastructure, amazing. Some of the amenities that we have, like that Southeast Community Center, Northside Aslan Center, Epic, all those, awesome. They definitely come at a cost. And we've got to be a little bit cautious of, all of these great things and great amenities while maintaining affordability, right? I will say, and I've been a proponent for this, streets and infrastructure, I believe, are an integral part of a healthy, clean community. And I've made examples of, like, when I've driven into, gosh dang, I can't think of the thing right now. It's not, down in Denver. It's probably better that I don't name the county or the city, but we would go down there for track and field. And I'm driving on these streets, and I'm like, man, this is just terrible streets and infrastructure, and there's potholes everywhere. And you drive in Fort Collins, and it's not the case. But Larimer County obviously has a lot more in it than Fort Collins. Loveland, Berthoud, Wellington, Red Feather, Estes, all of these different communities within the county, that this would generate $650 million, about $15 million annually for streets and infrastructure. Now, it does say essentials like groceries, gas, diapers, and prescription drugs would be exempt from this 0.15% sales tax, but it's a tax for the next 15 years, and we will be voting on it this November. Anyone in Larimer County will be voting on this November. So something to take into consideration, because it's hard. I mean, this is a 15-year tax, so this isn't going away. So we vote this, and you see your kind of tax at the checkout line increase. It's going to be like that for the next 15 years. But is it outweighed by some of the road infrastructure and construction projects that really make Larimer County a clean, well-kept, well-maintained place for people to do business, operate, ride bikes, all that good stuff? I talked about this a little bit last time, but a 5-story apartment building being proposed on a CSU fraternity house site. There would be a fraternity house, apartments. I bet you some ground floor commercial as well. But this is right across the street from Canvas. There's definitely going to just be more density with the focus on trying to offload some of this street congestion. I talked with somebody the other day. I would also, I'm asking you guys a lot this week, but hey, engage with me if you don't mind. Whether you're watching live, I'd love to see it now, or on a rerun, comment below. But I was talking to a friend of mine, and we're discussing rents for an apartment building that he was buying across the street from CSU. And essentially it was a over under duplex, and the upstairs rent, which was a 5-bedroom apartment, is renting out for nearly $4,200 a month. Now, and this has been stabilized for the last 3 years or so. So nearly $1,000 per bedroom. But I looked at him and I was like, you know what? And he goes, but it's literally right across the street from the College of Business. There's great parking there. And I looked at him and I kind of talked about how, as a parent, I could see myself justifying paying, an additional, let's just say, instead of like, let's say I could estimate $650 to $700 per bedroom in Fort Collins. I would say very, $650 is getting a little tough. $700 for sure. And instead pay $850 per bedroom. So an extra $150 per month. But my kid's not driving nearly as much because they're able to walk to school. So saving on gas, maybe even parking passes, saving that as well. The safety factor of it, because maybe, hey, you're in a place like Colorado, and so you're not having to drive on snowy, icy roads very much. And maybe, we'll just, not missing school as much, lots of different reasons. So maybe I could justify to myself, like, hey, I'm going to pay an extra $150 per bedroom to have them in this location. But I just thought it was really crazy to hear $4,200 per month for this apartment. Now that has it's a 5-bedroom deal in Fort Collins. So location is definitely a premium. People are willing to pay that premium for it. And we will continue to see those types of projects being proposed, except some of these I've been told, like multi-family developments, are no longer penciling. So that'll be interesting to watch. Let's see here. Last week, I got a text from a buddy of mine, and he just asked me about, what do I know about urban air closing? Oh, I can remove this. Sorry. What do I know about urban air closing? And I didn't know anything about it. And apparently they abruptly closed August 14th. Staff found out through a memo. Most people found out through, different Reddit pages or Facebook groups. And while there's locations down in Aurora and Denver, and I think Westminster are still open, there's no explanation about why urban air closed in Fort Collins. And urban air was definitely a fun place to go, like little go-karts in there, climbing walls. I mean, my kids were just there like 2 or 3 weeks ago for a full day, while their mom was, hanging out with them and letting them go through the climbing walls and things of that nature. So super interesting. I'm guessing there'll be more information that comes out sooner than later, but urban air is closed, and that's on the southeast side. And a comment that he made was, Fly High, which is the other trampoline park in southeast Fort Collins, looks like that's going to be the place for all birthday parties, which does mean it's going to be a little bit more congested there. So if you know anything, let me know. That'd be definitely interesting to see. Additionally, I probably got sent this by like 8 different people of a furry who joined in a wolf pack from Fort Collins furry joined a wolf pack, or tried to join, got mauled, had to go to a hospital. Now, apparently that's fake news, false news. There's some kind of like fact checkers out there, and it's kind of a satire deal. The image was generated from AI. So I did think that was interesting, because when I first saw it, which is just somewhat terrifying, because I'm not in the habit of checking every article about like a fact checker going to like a proof website or anything along those lines. But maybe that's like what's going to have to become like a habit or a ritual for us that are looking at different things and getting, news articles and clippings sent to us, because it's just so easy to generate content and information quickly, make it believable. And I mean, which is kind of sad, sure, that it is believable that a Fort Collins man that was representing himself as a furry, I want to say his like the name that he had on that name that he was like Brian Howlmaster or Howl Crowler or something silly. But so it appeared as though it was real, and people were making videos as if it were real, but the reality is it's fake. So no Fort Collins man that was mauled by a pack of wolves representing himself as a furry. I didn't know anything about this, and it seems like it'd be right up my alley. I could do this race all day long. I've talked about in the past how like there's the race from Fort Collins to Steamboat, how there's 5Ks, 10Ks, Boulder to Boulders, Colorado marathons, Colorado halves, all these kind of stuff that is just not my forte or cup of tea. A buddy of mine just asked me to do a half Ironman. I don't know if he was just kind of joking with me or not, but I was like, no, there's no chance that I'm going to do that. But this is going to be Ram Strength, and I think it's fourth annual 0.5K for a big cause. This is for cancer survivors, raising funds. Thursday, September 18th, 5 to 9 p.m. at Canvas Stadium. It's a 500-meter run, so people can dance, run, sprint, walk, whatever. That is my length. Give me the 500-meter run or walk, whatever that might be. But that's coming up here shortly, September 18th. The Kodak Alaris building. Now, Kodak was a big employer in Windsor for a long time. They employed up to 3,500 people at one point. And as we all know, as I'm recording on Instagram right now live, and not a joke, but something really kind of hit home to me was like how all the Radio Shacks are closed because everything that's in a Radio Shack is now in our phone. Microphones, recorders, videos, cameras, all that kind of stuff. Well, one of the bigger employers in Windsor was Kodak. And, there's Eastman Park, Kodak, Eastman Park, so there's some named streets that are named after Kodak. I mean, it was a big deal, but they're a shell of their former selves, and they do still employ, I think it's 100 employees on site for a specific department within Kodak, but their building, which is a few 100,000 square feet, sold for $23 million to an investment real estate company. And Kodak still plans to operate out of that building. But I just thought it was really interesting to look at kind of that history of Kodak had 3,500 employees at one point in Windsor, and now it has just 100 because such a changing dynamic in the photography and camera business. Let's see here. BizWest came out with an article that talked about how our unemployment numbers in the Boulder Valley, Northern Colorado area are lower than the state average and national average. Let's see here. Statewide unemployment rate of 4.5%, which is higher than the national average of 4%. Broomfield at 3.7%, Larimer County at 3.8%, Boulder at 4%, and Weld County a little bit higher at 4.3%. But one thing that's really great is our labor participation is at 67.6% versus national average of 62.2%. So as I talked about, as I will be talking about, I've got a video coming out about all the employers and jobs in Northern Colorado here shortly in a couple of weeks. No matter how affordable your mortgage is, no matter how, whether you got a 3% or 6%, the most important factor is strong jobs and economy. So that leads to us to some good information, at least along the Front Range, Northern Colorado, Larimer County, Boulder Valley. So hope to see those numbers remain strong. All righty, I am going to share my screen now, jumping into parking in downtown Fort Collins. Okay, so I'm going to roll through some of these slides because there's a lot of them. They reference the 2013 parking survey study and the 2017 downtown master plan. Some amazing information. If you ever want to just go deep into what Fort Collins is, what's going on now and in their future and what their plans are and goals are, there are plans amongst plans that you can just go deep in. So this is kind of it. They haven't done the full study, I think they have done the full study. They haven't released the updated study yet. So there's still the 2013 that you can see. But regardless, essentially what's trying to happen is this. We have an upside down system in downtown Fort Collins where the most valuable spaces are free and the spaces that are least desirable are paid. And there needs to be some changing on top of some revenue and expense discrepancies. Our revenue is not performing high enough to keep up with our maintenance and expenses for the buildings. So how can we offset that? So let's get going. I did like how they called it a parking system because everything goes together. Parking, bikes, transit, it all works together of how can we make this all one functioning organism, so to speak. Upside down pricing. So the most convenient, desirable on-street spaces are free, while less convenient garage parking spots cost money. Trolling for available on-street parking spots. Yes, you will find people trolling, going down parking, or flipping U's, trying to find the best parking spot there. And our parking structures are kind of like a last ditch effort. So let's see here. One of the things they thought was that we're not providing choices for people, and people like choices. So if there is a paid parking, that's a choice that we can choose to pay for an hour, 2, 3, 4, maybe more than that, or we can go park in the parking garage. 57 square miles, 6 miles are kind of regulated through parking services. I thought this was just kind of an interesting parking map downtown. All of these blue lines are 2-hour parking zones. The yellow are 15-minute, and then you got our parking garages right here. So, this is really the main stretch right here and along Mountain Avenue that people really are aggressive. They're always full. And then here's some good information for you. So there's 4,800 total spaces, 3,100 on-street, and 1,700 parking structure and surface lot spaces. Here's the Oak and Remington lot that's in kind of contention right now of like, hey, this is where an affordable housing project could be built. Here was 140 Oak, which was the affordable housing project that we had. Let's see if I can, that was built a couple of years ago. So that was some good information. Again, just kind of detailing what's 15 and 30. Here are what's our current situation. $0 for the first hour in the parking garage, $1 per hour after that. You can get parking passes for $50 to $60. That's if you can get the parking pass. Because like there are lots, I believe it's called the Oak lot, that has a wait list that had a wait list at one point for 5 years. I remember a quick story for you is when I was working for Old Town Square Properties, I signed us up for this list because we still owned a building at that point in the area, and it came up for renewal. We had already gotten one pass, and the person that happened to answer the phone that day didn't check with me, and maybe I didn't tell them. So that's also some of my responsibility that we wanted all the passes we could get because I've been on the list for 5 years. And it was like a month or two later, and she goes, "Oh yeah, we got a call like a month ago about that pass, but I told him we already had one, so we didn't need it." I was like, "What? No, I was on that list for like 4 years." So it's $50 to $60 per month if you can get the parking pass. Those are pretty high demand, high desired. And then one of the things they also talked about during the city council work session is the first time, and it resets on, here's some cheat codes for you folks that are living in, traveling to, or visiting Fort Collins. Every year, at least in our current system, it looks like it's probably going to reset or to change to something new. So it's only a cheat code for another, year or so. But every year, your parking tickets restart. So you get one freebie of parking longer than 2 hours in Fort Collins each year. So you get one freebie. The next one, I think, is $25. I think the second one's $25, and then it jumps to like $50, $75, and I think it caps out at $100. Now, I have had years where I have gotten to the $100 level, but with it being so cheap at $25 and you have one freebie, they said they actually don't see them as fines. They see them as fees because they're not high enough to impact change of behavior. So that's kind of one thing that they're also looking at is, should we increase the fines for violators? Here is what they're looking about, like our average occupancy on street parking. Evenings clearly are busiest, but they said anything if it's average above 80%, people see it as full and might not park down there. So, which is a challenge because for our evening, 19 of 24 block faces 80% or above. If you're looking for good place to park that isn't always full. Here are some good ones. And then I wanted to show, I thought maybe it showed more. Shucks. Well, I do want to show that 19 of 24 blocks show 80% or more. And that's a psychological barrier saying that these parking spots are full, which could lead somebody to either not park downtown and leave, or maybe park in the garage. But there's this disconnect of the best value spots. Here's one thing I thought was really interesting. So we had a 2013 parking study, and then we did a 2023 survey. Overall vehicle uses to get down increased from 76% to 86%. So, which is wild to me, because a big push of Fort Collins is how can we offload our streets and get people more to use buses and ride their bikes. And our vehicle usage to downtown actually increased from 2013 significantly by 10%. In 2013, 51% of respondents indicated they spent 2 hours or less downtown. And in 23, only 19% indicated they spent 2 hours or less. That's actually saying that a lot of people are spending 2 hours or more downtown, which could mean they would be willing to spend more money, but they got to go get in their cars and leave. So maybe a little bit bigger of a rush. So something to take note of there. Budgeted parking spots. So we got a lot of money from the American Recovery Act. Here's our financial sustainability model. Our revenue is not keeping up with our expenses. And that's something to where we have aging infrastructure, and we are either going to have to borrow from our general fund or produce additional revenue to offset some of those costs. So they're going through a parking, basically a parking system fit for the future. Here's kind of their timeline, and they're hoping to have this basically up and running by next year, 2026. They consulted with Walker Consultants, who is fine. Curb management was an interesting term that they used. Curb management, essentially, hey, how can we best leverage what curbs we have for the street and retail that are there, and maximize the people's time and efficiencies that kind of meet up with those, the best uses of those curbs. And also freight delivery, pickups, drop-offs, lifts, Ubers, all that kind of stuff. That's all being looked at, which is just, pretty crazy that they do that. Better address demand crunches. So like evenings, weekends, there are surge pricing models it doesn't look like Fort Collins is going that way. There are communities that do surge pricing parking models. It looks like Fort Collins is probably going to move to more of a flat rate parking structure when they implement this. Which this is kind of interesting. Our climate future, economy, reduce traffic congestion. We got to figure out something. If 10% more people are using their vehicles to get downtown this in 2026 versus 2023 versus 2013, got to figure out something. That's for sure. Okay, I wanted to skip some of that stuff for you. This is Placer AI. So it's an AI tool that the Downtown Development Authority, which is a great operation organization ran by some amazing people, leveraged for parking and data information. Essentially, it's a tool where if you have any app on your phone that tracks any types of location, it's tracking where you've come from and where you went, how long you spent there. And I'm like, man, this is a head in the sand type of deal for me. I know it's happening. I don't like it, but am I going to change it? No. So I guess just, there's my info. That being said, there was some really interesting data, specifically out of market visitors actually has dropped from 2019 from 2.4 to 2.1 million, except those 2.1 million people are visiting maybe a little bit more, spending a little bit less time in downtown. And I wonder if without the 2-hour parking, if that would actually increase. Here are I want to zoom in on this a little bit because I just think this is really interesting. Here are the hours of activity downtown. So our busiest time period is going to be noon, it looks like in 2019. But now in 2024, it's kind of more of our evening hours, which does support, because the main reason that people are coming downtown is for dining and shopping. Fewer and fewer people are working downtown. And so they're not having to come down. They're coming down for specific reasons, specifically dining and shopping. Here are the busier times of the week. Of course, Friday, Saturday are going to be the busiest. Thursday following up that. Here are where people are coming from to visit downtown Fort Collins. A lot of Denver, Boulder, Colorado Springs, Cheyenne, Laramie, Sterling folks over here. Some Greeley folks right here. Estes, all that good stuff are making their way into Fort Collins. The majority of our people are driving I think it's like 87%. Where does this show? 87% of people are, there we go. Yeah. 87% of all visitors are traveling 3 miles or more into downtown Fort Collins. So there aren't a lot of people who are living and spending time in downtown Fort Collins. Most of the people are commuting in. All right. I don't really care about the Oak parking lot. That is a affordable housing project, but I think it's kind of way too early to spend too much time on that. So here we go. One thing that was really interesting is, I want to see where it says, they talked about a value approach to parking spots, and Jenny Arndt kind of called them out on it and was like, what are we talking about? Value? Somebody who's willing to pay the most for the spots, value it more. And the staff or consultant, whoever it was, said yes. So essentially, we are looking at who values the spaces the most. I'm going to get down here a little bit. Again, upside down. Here are our revenues and expenses. So again, our expenses are increasing and our revenue is not necessarily. Some of these dollars were ARPA dollars. So those are going away, and we've been having to subsidize with general fund subsidies. But the aging infrastructure, we need to have some sort of revenue source, and this could be a spot for it. Here's where our revenue sources are coming from. Again, they've increased each year a little bit from subsidies from our general fund to offset our expenses. Here are what's telling people that 63% are wanting to stay 2 to 4 hours in downtown, followed by 2 hours or less, and then 4 to 8 hours. That's pretty wild. Don't care too much about that. They're looking at 1,328 spaces, or about 118 meters. Now, 118 doesn't equate to the full 1,328 spaces, but 118 meters to start that have dual meters to bring in, and it's going to cost about $900,000. Here is what the proposed plan will look like. The pink is going to be all of our paid area. Green is going to be the 2-hour area. And then there's some extended zones away from there. But pink is going to be the paid parking. Green is 2-hour parking. So they're not getting rid of 2-hour parking. They're just moving in paid parking. Here's the low end of the estimated cost and the high end. Here are some revenue estimates bringing this in. So they're estimating an additional $2.8 to $5.5 million, or specifically from the paid parking, $2.4 to $4.2 million. They wanted to look at peer cities and communities. Like how did this impact these areas, and are they doing it? And actually, it was hard for the city staff to look at these because there was 16 of the 19 peer communities already had paid parking. So this is not new. This is definitely something that is expected. And if you're a business owner, you might be scared, like, hey, this is going to keep people from coming downtown. But what they found is actually not true. So they looked at both Idaho Springs and Manitou Springs, and they didn't say that paid parking is a causation of additional sales tax revenue. They were just saying that, hey, it didn't decrease sales tax. So that was one thing that you didn't want to see is once paid parking was implemented, did it decrease sales tax revenue, AKA demand in downtown? And that is not the case. So that's all I've got for parking in downtown Fort Collins. I will say it's really nice to have free parking for 2 hours, but there's a lot of people who do the trolling, finding parking spots because, hey, I want to be really close, and even some dangerous driving, honestly, as well, because like parking spots are coveted downtown. And I actually got a ticket because I cut across a lane. I saw that I was safe. There was nobody in my left lane, but there was a spot in the middle, the median, and I cut across and and parked there because I was late to dinner for the whiskey still, and ended up being very late because I heard whoop whoop, and a police officer came up and I said, yeah, I knew exactly what it did, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna give you a ticket, and I was like, awesome, thank you. So it can cause some, maybe aggressive behavior, trolling, gas, emissions, all that kind of stuff. So it looks like this is probably City of Fort Collins. All the city staff was like fully on board with this. So it seems like this is probably going to be something that isn't fictional. It's coming. All righty. There's some things that are happening this weekend. We've got Tour de Fat. That's pretty much the elephant in the room. August 23rd, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. at New Belgium, but the parade starts a little bit earlier. And so dress up, get on your bike. It's family friendly. They don't want to have dogs there because of 1, the heat, and 2, of how many people are going to be there. But then go celebrate at New Belgium. And if you are biking, bike safe, because I will say there are tickets being given. And while I think that police officers are relatively laid back, if you are belligerently drunk and unable to ride your bike safely, they will give you a ticket on that one. So if you're a little buzzed, just be safe, please. You can take those trails back home, as are a lot of people, and that's what they do on the Pooter Trail. But other than that, you got the 3rd annual Turkish Festival, August 24th, 1 to 5 p.m. And this is basically Turkish culture, music, dance, art, cuisine. And this is the 3rd annual festival. So if you're interested in that, 411 South Bryan Avenue. Finally, our last things to do this weekend are, there's always amazing tours around. And we actually took one this last weekend at the Morning Fresh Dairy Farm. And I think it's $6 per person, but it's about a 60 to 90 minute tour. And it was super cool. You got to hear the history of Morning Fresh Dairy, how it's a 6th generation now farm, family owned and operated. You learn about Noosa. You get to have some samples. I had a cinnamon roll Janae said it was made for 4. And I said, well, thank goodness I'm 4. So it was amazing. It was delicious, but it's a fun tour. And then Vortic Watches have also been on their tour. So if you're just looking for something to do, or if you got family coming in, or you're visiting the area, set up a tour, go check it out. There are some, really cool gems in Fort Collins that you just don't always think about. Now, that is all I've got for this week. If you've got any questions, I'll hang around for just a tad bit longer and see what's going on. We started off the show, if you're just joining, how Pooter School District is doing half days this week because of the temperature, and how difficult that could be for some families and individuals. So definitely feel free to chime in and comment there about what your thoughts are. There was one last piece here. It said, to clarify, ventilation is not provided during the school day. My understanding is that the schools are cooled overnight with outdoor air. Oh, interesting. We were up in Red Feather this weekend, and it was a solid 20 degrees difference. It was 90 degrees here, 95 degrees here, and it was like 70 to 75 up in Red Feather. And that was a really nice, reprieve from the heat. We went out to Dowdy Lake, was awesome. We went and cast our reels because we didn't catch any fish. I guess you could call that trying to catch fish or fishing. I don't know. But it was a good time. And so if you're trying to get away, and it's called, there's a new restaurant coming up to Red Feather called the Thirsty Moose. And so that kind of adds a third little spot to join and hang out there. There's more than that, but there's the Tavern, Potbelly, and now the Thirsty Moose. If you're looking kind of for a fun, vibe-filled little restaurant getaway that's only about 50 minutes from Fort Collins, you got to go check out the Tavern. They just built their kind of new music stage, and it is just awesome. I mean, we were there for a few hours. I think we were there for 2 or 3 hours, had some really good pizza, pasta, a few drinks, listened to some music, and then went home. So want to just give a shout out to the Tavern because they're just doing some cool things up there. All right. Don't have any other questions or anybody reaching out, but I appreciate you guys watching. Until next week, have a great day. All right, Instagram.